Good morning, everyone, for attending our America Makes Virtual Game Day. I'm Tara Sarver. I am I am the program coordinator and event lead for America Makes. And so just want to welcome everyone. Hope everyone enjoys this great discussion that we're going to have today. I see a lot of everyone is starting to join already for our panelists, but we're going to go through a few introductions before we get everything started. So I just want to say thanks again for everyone joining. Thanks for the panelists ahead of time. I think this will be a great discussion, and especially to John Barnes for moderating this today. I'm also going to introduce everyone to Janet Carr, who may not know Janet. I think everyone in the additive community knows Janet. She's with Link3D, who is sponsoring our remote platform today. And I hope everyone had the opportunity to join the networking and enjoyed actually the virtual networking that we had. I know it's nothing close to being face-to-face as AMUG was last week, but we're doing the best we can virtually, and hopefully we'll get to see you soon. So while as I say that, I'd like to share one little tidbit of information before we get started. We have next technical review and exchange, and it will be hosted at the Ohio State University, and it will be live and in person August 3rd to 4th. So please mark your calendars. We are just going to start promoting this now. This is the first kickoff for this exciting event, and we're super excited, America Makes, that we're going live. So we will be opening registration soon, so I'm sure all of you will be hearing that. We hope that you will get to join us for this fantastic event that we always have such a great turnout.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you all virtually. My name is Janet Carr. I'm with a company called Link3D. We'll just share a little bit about who we are, so everyone is aware of what we do, and note that we're not a virtual conferencing company. As what remote is and does is we are a company that offers MES, quality management systems for additive manufacturing operations. So you can help gain visibility into your additive operations, get this information to help with qualification programs, understanding operational improvements so that you can do more with what you have. And on top of that, in the theme of quality management today, our goal is to help you identify potential bottlenecks, help collect documentation so that you can ensure that you are in compliance with your ISO AS9100 standards, other standards that you are working towards. And this is done through a suite of solutions from ordering, planning and scheduling, post-production, manufacturing analytics, quality, digital inventory to support reordering or spare parts management programs, most recently, we also announced that we launched the Watch IoT platform, which helps you connect your shop floor to your digital environment so that you can then centralize all this data in one place, whether it's your 3D printer, post-processing equipment, to quality tools. And so today, Link3D has been working towards enabling additive manufacturing players across the world. We have over 650 industrial machines that we are supporting today with over 4,000 users worldwide. So really here helping organize enable their additive journey. So if you're ever interested in learning about how we're doing this for others, especially across the aerospace and defense, medical, energy, and other sectors, feel free to reach out to myself, my colleague Roxanne Warren, who's also in, would be happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Thank you so much, Janet. So now I'm going to introduce, I don't think I need to introduce him, but I'm going to introduce him anyway, to John Barnes, who will be our moderator. He's also an America Makes ambassador. So John, thank you again for doing this. Hello to the panelists. I didn't get to see all of you before the event. So John, it's all over to you.
Great, thank you. It's a privilege to be here this morning, or this afternoon, I guess, depending on where you are. I am going to moderate the session today. I think it's going to be a good one. We had a good pregame. We've got some interesting characters on the panel, which some of whom I knew, some of whom I didn't. We have a lot of mutual acquaintances. So I'll be in that role today. We're going to talk about qualification. I think this is a hot topic within the industry at the moment. It seems to be very mysterious. It seems to be very, very hard. Hopefully we'll dispel both of those things. I mean, it's not easy, but it's a process. And it's just like that Beastie Boys song. No, I'm just kidding. There's no songs about qualification. I looked, kind of my thing, but I just came up with nothing. So you'll just have to deal with making up your own introductions. But with that, we're going to go through some quick round of introductions of the panel, and then we'll move right into the discussion. As Janet kindly pointed out, there is a Q&A tab. So we'll monitor that and be happy to field that. And then I think the nice part of this platform is that ability, for those people who are still shy to ask questions, to move to the tables and kind of have more of that one-on-one conversation. So encourage everybody to stick around for that. So with that, I think we'll start with Isis Roche Rios. Hopefully I did okay with that. I can't get the R just yet, but she's with Raytheon. So Isis, maybe you want to introduce yourself and maybe talk about your role on the project quickly.
Well, you did really well with the R's. Don't worry about it. And the only thing you did is picking me first. Didn't I tell you that I was new at this? So like John was saying, so my name is Isis Roche Rios. I pronounce it in Spanish. That's why it sounds like that. I'm a mechanical engineer with Raytheon Missiles and Defense, with over 20 years of experience. Currently, I lead the Heritage Raytheon Missile Systems Small Business Technology Innovation Program, which supports small businesses using the U.S. government SBIR STTR program funding to develop technology. And interestingly, I started the path towards my current position as lead of the program, working as a principal investigator for some of the projects, and this project with AlphaStar was my first. So I kind of grew with AlphaStar in the technology development and in my position in the company within this group. So it's an interesting curiosity today. I really didn't think about it until I was thinking about my introduction today.
Well, I appreciate that you followed the script, because Rashid is the next person that I was going to ask to introduce themselves from AlphaStar. So I think it's almost like we wrote this intentionally. So Rashid.
Thank you, John. I'm Rashid Niraj. I'm the Director of Technical Operations at AlphaStar, and in that capacity, I'm basically responsible for optimizing business operations, but more importantly, developing and maintaining strategic partnerships with government, industry, and academia. We're just kind of always looking for new pathways for the company to stay on the cutting edge. And that role allows me to know what's going on in industry, know what's going on in academia, and pull that together to push AlphaStar in that right direction. And I know I'm backed up with a tremendous team behind me, so whatever we put on the table, I know we can accomplish.
Great. And Ankit, have you up next. You've been with EOS for quite a while, and fortunately we've been able to cross paths numerous times over several years. Can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure, John. Thanks, everyone, and good morning. My name is Ankit Saharan. I'm a Senior Manager for Metals Technology for EOS here in North America. So in that role, I'm kind of responsible everything that relates to the metal side for EOS here, except the service part, which is harder than most people realize. But I think I always say that I got the easy job of doing helping customers and doing exciting projects. So yeah, and we had a pretty good collaboration here with AlphaStar, and I think doing some of those builds here helped them validate. I think kind of helps the technology even push it a tiny bit further.
Great. And lucky last is Kevin with Renishaw. We had not met, but we have numerous 1 degree of separations. So Kevin, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, everybody. I am an applications engineer and smart manufacturing ambassador with Renishaw here in the United States. I've been with Renishaw for 7 years now, spent all of my time with the additive manufacturing group. My role has primarily been through that time working with customers either pre-sale or post-sale in support of their onboarding of the technology, whether that might be through supporting in design for additive activities or in laser parameter development activities. And so this project work that we were doing alongside AlphaStar was right square in the middle of my wheelhouse, bringing a lot of these factors together. So I'm looking forward to getting into the meat of that today in that discussion.
Well, good. I welcome you all to the session this morning. I think this, my team, we talk a lot about, help a lot of people with their qualification efforts, and qualification, is a process. I wanted to start with Isis. Maybe you could describe, the path around the part requirements and how that helped shape this. I assume you started with requirements and, work backwards, but I don't want to presuppose anything. You're on mute.
You would think so. And to give you a little bit of history, so this one for this project started maybe late 2016, early 2017. And back then, RMS was just starting to gather momentum in its knowledge gathering path into additive manufacturing. You had some individuals that had a lot of in-depth knowledge, but as a company, we weren't that into the capability yet, and things like that. So truthfully, the part was selected as a low-risk pathfinder. So this particular part is used to mount a camera to one of the targets that are used in our flight tests for our products. And targets are mostly one-offs, right? They're tailored for each test and things like that. So using additive manufacturing to print some of the parts for the targets, it's right in the wheelhouse of the benefits of additive manufacturing, right? Where you can print from target to target, you can change the shape because you're using a different camera or it's a different target, so you need to mount it slightly different. So that's what we were looking at the time, not really in terms of requirements or optimization. These one-offs, we don't optimize the design because we just needed to do what it needs to do one time and keep moving. But it was the agility that of changing design that we were looking at. The other side of things is the part was not designed for additive, right? So we were still at the phase where we just wanted to print whatever we had originally designed. I don't think the company had gotten yet to the point of understanding that we needed to do design for additive manufacturing.
So what was it? Did it be a metal part? So it sounds like mainly it was largely about just making a shape and doing that maybe in a schedule.
You froze, John. I can't hear you anymore.
Okay, how about now?
Yep, you're back.
Okay, I shall never go on mute again. So I was asking about the requirements of the part. Was being metallic a requirement? Did it have a certain size volume that it needs to fit in? Were there strength requirements at all, or things of that kind of nature?
So in terms of requirement, we were looking at a size, fitting the standard metal, because we did want to go practice something with metal. Now, in terms of the loads, for example, that the part was going to see, it wasn't a critical part. That was also why it was selected, because we're playing with something that's not as critical. So if it happened to be printed and had lower strength than we thought we needed, or cracks or any other defects, right, we could still use it to learn from it, but not necessarily risk a project where it would have been used. So it was literally size, so it would fit within the printer's sizes and conveniences at the time. Looking for metal, aluminum is something that we use everywhere, right? Lightweight, pretty strong for the weight. And we wanted to start the process with that. So those were the key parameters, not necessarily being a critical part, but being a good part for an example of what we can achieve as we move forward.
Perfect. Rashid, it seems like you're the linchpin in this operation. Why don't you talk to us about how the project came together in the first place?
As Isis mentioned, it goes back some ways, and it's crazy how 2016, in terms of additive universe, seems like a really long time ago, particularly in terms of what people have accomplished in the last 4.5 years. So way back then, it was in the case of working with the community, our goal was to kind of always understand what are their pains, what's going on, because we're the simulation shop, the OEMs, the fabricators are actually building the parts. What's our contribution? It comes both to understanding what the pain is and how we can address it, again, through a simulation, through a software tool approach. Back in 2016, the MDA laid out a solicitation looking for affordable AM, looking for technologies, new technologies to support affordable AM. And so we approached that, and we again looked at what are the pains, what are the problems that the industry is seeing, and qualification was a critical part of that. And then we understood that the utilization of ICME tools could really be a helpful component of that. We understand where we wanted to take it, but we wanted to step-by-step work with our partners to kind of make that happen. And we reached out to Raytheon, and we met Isis, and we found a really good partner in the sense of wanting to achieve the same goals that we had in mind. And again, in kind of all building block approach, understanding that a non-critical part was a good first test, then exploring whether it was polymer metals, exploring other metals, and slowly building onto that process. So it came through that MDA program. They really loved what we had accomplished with ISIS and Raytheon and the University of Dayton Research Institute during that phase 1, and they allowed us to extend it and explore that whole area of qualification by bringing on other partners. And as you can see, the generosity of EOS and of Renishaw to really work with us to push the science and participate with Raytheon is what really made this a valuable project. And we learned a lot, and we worked together, and hopefully we made some significant contributions to the industry.
Yeah, I always tell people, I think, one of the things that's interesting about this industry is it does seem to work together rather well, even, quote unquote competitors, but it does seem to have a more of a community feel to it than others. Maybe I can get some input from everybody else on, what your goals for this project were. So maybe Ankit, ask you what some of your early objectives were for the project and what really drew you to it.
So when we initially we've been talking with AlphaStar, outside the scope of this project as well. So we're kind of on and off trying to understand, where the technology could be applied, and we see more and more of these technology and tools come into play with different other companies and different other places as well, within academia as well as private industry. But when this project was approached to us, I think it seemed like a very good case where it could be validated, because whenever we used to speak with AlphaStar, it would be like, good, it's a very good technology where we can apply. Can we get an end user behind it? And when Raytheon program came in, it was like the perfect thing. Like, okay, we've got an end user who can define who can define the part, who can define the criteria, who can define the success of what a program would look like, where it would be a struggle for us as an OEM to, define what a successful, whether a part is qualified or not, because we have no say in that. I think that's the end user's prerogative to actually make that decision. So I think that was our main intention, was to, basically try it out, the technology, and see how it actually works out. And we did a build in aluminum, and once we got the parameters, we kind of checked against where we were. It was pretty close to where we would have actually placed it, even within our standard parameter sets. There was a little bit of a difference, but we were interested to see how the prediction models that they're running would run against empirical models. And that was my prime motivation to, see if it actually, we've heard a lot about it, but does it actually work?
Yes. And then, of course, the aerospace community wants you to then prove it for the next 10 years.
Exactly.
Yeah. Kevin, what were some of your original thoughts or goals for wanting to be involved?
initially it's very similar to what Ankit was saying. This idea that it's an interesting approach to laser parameter or speeds and feeds, if you want to call them that, development and assignment that we hadn't really come across before. Ankit mentioned how the laser parameters being used were not that different to what had been derived empirically. Certainly at Renishaw, we have very much, from the outset of our involvement in additive, been keen to try and democratize aspects of the process, such as laser parameters. But as you can imagine, when you start providing openness in that regard and potentially opening up the process for experimentation, there's a lot of questions that come up. Where do you start? What's the most efficient way to develop a new material? Things like that. So the notion of having a feed-forward simulation input was intriguing, and the idea that it was a real-world, or very close to a real-world use case, meant for us we couldn't turn down the opportunity to help out.
Perfect. And so, Isis, I'm going to come back to you on this. These. I'd imagine. Can you kind of give us some insight to how important it is to be able to show the same result on multiple platforms? I mean, that in and of itself, especially back in 2016, I think certainly more doable in 2021 than it was in 2016. But just talk to us about how important that is for OEMs.
So you're gonna understand, right? We've talked about qualification and using the software to help with qualification, and this is a brand new technology, and within the company, there's no way. For us, qualification is not a place to test and try out things. We don't go to qualification to fail and figure something else out. So before we even think about trying to qualify something, we got to feel pretty confident that we know what the results are going to be. And then additive manufacturing, when it started, when we started moving forward and seeing what was out there and experimenting with it ourselves, there's just so many parameters, so many things that you have to control, that you have to know how it impacts, the sensitivity of that impact. Do I need to control it, or do I don't care even if it changes a little? And all of these things, it's from different areas of knowledge, right? You can't have just one person that knows about a particular feature. You gotta know from all areas. And then you change materials and the rules change, right? I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm used to, there's always exceptions, of course, but I'm used to, metals. If they fall in the isotropic category, I know how to deal with them. They're all, temperatures may change, strengths may change, but they all behave similarly, kind of thing. Again, I know there's exceptions in specialty metals, but in general, right? And here, you change the material, things change. The effectivity of your parameters are not the same, things like that. So there was a lot of hesitation there, and there still is, in how much do we really know in order to assess risk and say, okay, can we go to qualification? So having a software that can help you predict some of these things ahead of time, that has an accuracy that we can live with, that we can measure and know what the risk is ahead of time, where we can verify with limited testing ahead of time. Of course, final verification will always require heavy testing. At Raytheon, we deal with people's lives. We have to work right every time, the first time. And in order to prove that, there's no quality levels of sampling or anything like that, right? Things, we have to know what's going on. But even to get to that point, we have to feel confident. So having something that can predict, that we can use to play with, like Kevin was saying, when you're developing a new material, where do you start? How do you even improve every iteration without it costing too much, because you have to print and 1,000 samples and do all of these things? That's an incredible measure of reducing risk up front and reducing the amount of schedule that it requires to get the information to even determine if you want to follow it, right? We're working in a world where we want everything yesterday. These long 5-10 year developments, that's not what we can live with anymore. They want new products out. The government's looking 2 years, right? It's like 2 years. That's experimentation. That's when we're learning what we're doing, and you want it out and producible and low cost and in 2 years. Well, it's a challenge, and additive manufacturing can get us there, but there's the hesitation of the people that are not involved with additive every day. How much do they know? How much can I trust my decisions, my gut, my history, all my experience? I got to throw it away because additive is totally different. I need to dive into this other realm. And again, having a tool that you can trust to take you to the point where you are now with other things, the point where now you have experience, now you've seen it work. That is invaluable. The hard part, of course, is that we are all here. We're all in the additive manufacturing world in some way. We're all getting this information. Raytheon is a massive company, and the customer is a massive company. So getting everybody to see the data, to understand what the data means, to take the extra risk, it's a bit of an uphill climb. But that's why we're here, right? To be disruptive with our innovation, and that always takes time. That always takes effort, and it takes step. And in the meantime, we continue working with AlphaStar. Now that we have the relationship with Renishaw and EOS, hopefully we can add and just gather more data, more examples, continue teaching the company and the people in the company, take us to the next level.
Great. So as you said a couple of things that I think resonated. Rashid, I'd imagine that, what you're hearing from ESIS is not atypical for what you're hearing from different OEMs everywhere. So on the one hand, aerospace has this issue around safety, managing, safety critical parts, et cetera. But even on ground-based systems, there's an economic argument to be made as well. You can't afford for 1,000 parts to get released and fail, downstream. Is that true? Are you hearing these similar kind of requirements, coming from different OEMs?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, across the board, whether it's the process of trying to convince yourself that the AM process is acceptable, that I guess the old industry standard of 10 trials and error to build a part till you finally got it to a point that you had trust in it. But also understanding, as Isis mentioned, is having those tools, the ICMIA tools, that allow you to foresee those challenges, to understand the effective defects, consequences of those, being able to build it up slowly from the building a block approach, looking at the coins, capturing roughness and voids, looking at the dog bones and understanding the strength, looking at the combs and understanding distortion, and working a way forward. And the fact that you can potentially do that virtually, where you are supplementing it by test, but putting those two elements together can dramatically save time and dramatically save cost. And that's what everybody's trying to do, both get that safe, secure part and try to do it efficiently and within budget. So we have getting a lot of feedback like that from major OEMs. Grateful for that, and more importantly, getting back to our friends at EOS and Renishaw, having that combined tool effect, that you've got two sets of teammates that are ready to work together to help you to solve your problem, and how these tools, when properly integrated, can really get you good results fast. And so again, the simulation supports the build completed by testing gets you the validation, and that way you can move forward in a confident manner.
Yeah, so I thought maybe, Kevin and Ankit, you can weigh in on this. So I suspect, matter of fact, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but that's my job. I'm here to ask questions. So gosh, is it possible that when you guys talk to customers that they're really interested in answering these questions, and having a simulation tool is, especially one that may be third party, so it's not just your opinion of what's happening? Kevin, let's start with you.
Yes, definitely get asked all the time. It's particularly in the instances of new materials coming online. The investment in development is, it's non-trivial, and investment in time is also non-trivial, because obviously, running arrays even to optimize, just to say, the bulk density of a new material is a consuming process. So any means of accelerating that process is fantastic. Indeed, Isis was talking about the metallurgy and mechanical aspects of a new product line, but it's also the coupling of geometry and parameters and material that all comes together. The notion of having a simulation tool that can potentially handle those three aspects simultaneously is massively important. And also, and I'm sure Ankit will probably, or I certainly think you'll think the same way, the notion that this could be machine agnostic is very good, because although we're fierce competitors with one another, obviously the tide rises all boats. So any tool that is designed to agnostically push forward the industry is certainly good by us.
Yeah, so I that's a good point. So I mean, you guys compete on a lot of things, but making good parts probably isn't one of those things. That's hopefully an implicit assumption that that's going to happen. Ankit, do you agree with that?
I agree with that. I think everyone, there's no OEM, I think, out there trying to make bad parts. I think everyone wants to make good parts. I think that by nature is good. But from an ICME standpoint, and I think from a simulation standpoint, I feel that it's a start. The conversation, in my opinion, is not completely there yet, especially on the aerospace side, because as John, you know, and Isis probably, and Rashid, everyone would agree, it's prove, try again, prove again, try again, prove again. It's kind of always like that. So trust doesn't come easy in the aerospace side, unfortunately. So, and it is hard earned, and it is going to be some work to actually get there. But I think I'm confident that we can. We just need to work through it. But qualification in general, I think it's a very wide term, thrown sometimes loosely, because every industry has their own way of qualifying things. Automotive has a very, very different way of doing, coming from the tooling side, from the aerospace side, where aerospace side, even within the aerospace, you're talking about people are more, some cases you'd be more worried about high cycle fatigue or, creep or something. And maybe, I remember one space company that we were qualifying with, and we were talking about, fatigue cycles and everything. And the space company basically said that I don't care about a fatigue cycle. It's just got to go one time in space. That's it. For me, it's a one shot. I don't care about fatigue, as long as it can take 2 years. So the requirements are quite diverse, even within the aerospace industry. So I think it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's kind of has to be gauged and measured depending on what the application and what the end use is for everybody.
Yeah, I think I always I likened it. I was rewatching Moneyball, and he goes process. It's about the process, and so qualification is about the process. Rashid, let's talk a bit about the ICME aspects, and I think it's worth reflecting. If we go back 5 years to 2016, what that meant, but maybe for the benefit of the audience, let's define ICME a little bit, and then talk to us about those specific aspects that caused this project to kind of go forward.
Well, I'll kind of give you a reason for ICME because there's so many definitions out there, but I'm a long in the tooth engineer. I've been around a while. And if I remember way back, everything was so separated and segmented. So you might get a request for a material system and somebody would define that, and they would be passed on to the design team and they would lay out what the design was, and the football would be passed on to the fabricators. And there was very little communication going on in that process. And the idea now, where particularly with additive manufacturing and digital technology, there's a thread that's running through all of this. So if you can think of ICME as a tent in which you have the design, you have the materials, and you have the processes all together, now we can find ways, formulate ways to maximize that integration. And so in the case of ICME, materials don't just stand at a physical number corresponding to a failure or a fracture or fatigue property, but are the multi-scale, multi-level perspectives on those constituent properties. What's happening at the lowest level? How does that affect a part? What does that consequence at that level? Does it propagate up? And so because we have that digital technology, and we are talking about integrated computation materials engineering, we were able to carry that forth, that detailed understanding up and down, and consider it not only in the fabrication of the part, not only in the performance of the as-built as is virtual part or fabricated part, does that feed back to the design? So now instead of a separate bunch of people passing a football, we kind of have a loop where we can all work together and look for ways to constantly improve that part, whether it's designed for additive, whether it's modified for additive, or it's constantly revisiting the design altogether way back in the stage one. But it's a digital thread now, and IC&E is almost like the glue, the blood that makes that flow.
And so how would you describe 2021 versus 2016? If you were to do this project now, and this, Rashid, I'll start with you, but I think it's probably open to everybody else as well. How much advancement has there been in 5 years?
Well, I mean, there's two sides to that coin. How much has there been adoption of technologies, as Ankit said? It's prove it, prove it, prove it. So in the war chest at Alpha Star, the variation, the expansion, the additions of new tools compared to 2016 and today are enormous. We have things that we can play with that we really wish we thought about, we considered, we kicked around. We just weren't there yet in terms of the validated tool set to do that. So the fundamental train was always there. We're dealing with trial and error builds. How do we eliminate that? We're trying to find ways, as Ankit said, uniquely for each organization to qualify a part, whatever that might be. During that evolution, of that 5-year evolution, internally at Alpha Star, we came up with our own kind of categories of qualification, referring back to those particular challenges in the case of metal AM that are constant, that pop up. How do you deal with micro defects? How do you deal with macro defects? What's going on with roughness? What's going on with distortions and warpage? How do you deal with net shape? And so what our tools have evolved, and also the process integrating the ICMM process into it, has come forward is understanding the traditional building block of aerospace, of automotive, understanding the traditional building block, getting your ICME tool at each level to validate your result, say at the coin level for void and roughness, at the dog bone level for material strength, tensile strength, working your way up and knowing hand in hand that those tools are providing the correct results. In 2016, we had a method to do that. In 2021, we have even more advanced tools such as our thermal management tool, TMG, where we can really predict the depth, width, dynamic processes of the melt pool. We're exploring areas such as GBE, grain boundary engineering, where the inherent processes of the build can now affect grain structure, or we know how to capture it, we know how to predict it, which means we know how to optimize it and drive it. These are tools that are coming on hand to us, and we're working with partners to actually implement and validate them. So yeah, we've come a long way. The process itself is still the same. We're just getting better at solving it.
So for you guys, this is probably that adage, it's an overnight success, 20 years in the making.
Exactly.
ESIS, I mean, let's, from the OEM level, the confidence that comes with having an analysis tool of many flavors, but, can you kind of give us, how much easier is your life when you have an analytical package that is accurately predicting things? When you go talk to the stress people and the myriad of other engineers that are in the way of the qualification path?
It has been very interesting because, again, there's so many steps in the design process, and like Kevin was saying, and Enki was saying, with the development or printing a part, the features are going to make things different. The design are going to make things different. The materials, and we're used to a certain process. We're used to certain things. You have to talk to different people at different levels, and everybody has their own little way of considering whether they trust the information that they're getting when they're doing the analysis or not, right? Even with standard tools, you think of ANSYS or any other analysis tool, right? Depending on how you set up your mesh, your results can be more accurate or less accurate. And each company has its own studies and preferences and set of rules of thumb to guide people as you know, because you don't always have the expert doing the work, right? You're growing and mentoring people, and you have to develop these rules of thumbs, this experience that you teach as you go through. And I think that that is one of the hardest things to break through. The idea that until we use this tool multiple times and can see the process and can understand and can develop those rules of thumbs, trusting the tool, trust how far off am I really when I'm doing this, it's a hard thing. Trust, like you said, and like was said earlier, in aerospace and anything that is safety critical, it's hard to come by. It's hard to move into. It's hard to take the risk, and it's a little bit hard. So I'll tell you that one of the things that impressed me the most originally when we started back in 2016, and most innovative is the MCQ component of the software, right? So like Kevin was saying, every time we try to come up with a project for additive manufacturing, the first hurdle is the material properties. If we can't get past that, if we can't figure out a way to gain confidence on predicting the material properties ahead of millions of dollars in testing and all this other stuff, the projects are dead in the water immediately, right? That's the first question we get asked as soon as we say, ooh, we could probably do this part with additive. They're all going like, do you have a material that's certified? Do you know what the properties are, right? Our teams are, again, with certain exceptions, are used to tables of properties from years and years of data. For now, we're like, well, I might find a source that did an experiment and got some numbers, but you know, how do I trust that? Have they really looked? Do they had enough of a sample size? So you start questioning everything, right? Because there's no book that the industry trusts with a list of parameters. So right there, that's the first stop. That's being able to say, well, now we have a software, right, that can help us in the process of trusting that data for material properties, and the trust grows as you go, right? You start with a particular parameter, you edit it with some data, and you get more information. You get your predictions get tighter and closer and less uncertainty. I think that is a something that this software is unique in, as far as my knowledge of current software out there is. I'll admit I'm a bit biased since I've been working with AlphaStar for 5 years now. But that's people saying that's something that is unique to their software. And it's impressive, right? That's the foot end that I hope to impress on people. Then the connection to software, where you don't necessarily have to even manually do things, a connection to software that can take it to the process of doing the analysis, of updating the analysis automatically as you automate, or you get better data for the properties, as taking into account shape and all the other parameters. I think it's the path to jumping over those initial hurdles, and the key thing is going to be getting enough data to show and get people away from that initial gut reaction of trust. That's going to be hard, and that's what I've been concentrating in with my relationship with AlphaStar, is trying to figure out ways of bringing that information into the company and into the stakeholders, right? The people that are making the decisions, because the technical people are ready. You know, we're jumping at the bit to go do this. But the people that make the decisions, the program managers, quality, right? They're always saying, how do I approve this? How do I know that this is I don't know enough. So all of these things, it's just, it's a major endeavor, but I think AlphaStar has done a great job on Rashid was saying, on understanding what are your fears, where are your problems, and trying to work into the software ways to reduce those fears, to reduce that risk, to give you the information you need from the software into the next step, which is actually building and then corroborating what you built.
Yeah, there's nothing better than, dealing with the elegant complexity of trying to get a part approved, through a process, because it's got to meet a commercial need, it's got to meet a technical need, it's got to meet a quality need, supply chain. And, you can simultaneously tell somebody, yeah, you can make any shape you want. And then you've got infinite parameters and you just watch the expression, melt off their face. So on the point, we heard building block, which I love. So I might go with Kevin on this one. When we talked about the progression of the builds and, this building block approach, what was it for you that, first you gleaned from it? Was this like a normal project? Was it a different project in scope? And you just kind of go from there. I mean, what did we learn out of the building block approach? I assume from a process it was exactly the same, but give us some details. And that's open to either of you to start with.
Okay. So I think the thing that really got my interest was receiving a Word document talking about the project scope and things like this, and seeing a single table of laser parameters and being told, these are what you're going to print with no foresight, no prior testing, just stick these in and see what happens. And for the first time in a long time, there was a handful of us around the machine looking through the window in genuine curiosity as to what was going to happen. We talk about the notion of processing new materials, the notion of the coupling of material and geometry in this process. The first challenge is to make sure you actually print something, right? You actually get to the end of the print. So when you're pressing play with brand new parameters that have never been used before, there's that added element of peril that makes it particularly interesting. So I think that was kind of the first part, but then also how impressive it was when we started doing a lot of geometric inspection of the parts post-process. We were using our 5-axis structured light scanning equipment. How good a job these parameters that to us were alien did maintaining the same quality with parameters that had taken years to develop. And actually the ones provided a boost in productivity as well. So to get those benefits and certainly on the face of things achieve the same quality part was outstanding.
Great.
Yeah, I'd agree with Kevin. I think it was very similar on our side as well. We were also kind of sticking the parameters in it, kind of seeing what exactly happens. We had a little bit of trouble with the support because I think but that's where I think I would say, design for additive comes into play a little bit. But other than that, we were kind of pleasantly surprised that the parts built with a hard blade, no problem. And the one thing I would say is that that's actually more amazing is that I've been with Renishaw kind of doing the same build. I'm hoping with a similar set of process window than with the EOS as well. And I think even using different powders, to be honest, as well, that's kind of very unique. It hasn't been done a lot of times. It has been done very few times, but it just shows that, you've got a pretty, if your process window is this big, it's probably right in the center of it. So that was something good to come out. I would say a positive that came out of it. But I would say is that something would definitely not follow development curves as well if this indeed holds true. And what happens if we go higher layer technically? Does it still hold true? So these are questions that immediately came to our mind. I couldn't do that. I don't think there's going to be an end to it, but yeah, we had a very similar approach to what Renishaw had.
Yeah, and I think that control element is really important. You know, for it to be a process that's useful, it has to be able to be controlled, and we have to feel like we have control over the process. And I think sometimes that's probably underestimated. Control means I can do this and make it go high or make it go low. You know, it's up to me.
So if I may interject here, because you mentioned control, and that is a key thing in the trust part of things, right? I may trust the answer you're giving me right now, but how do I know that this is under control and that the next time I come through, I'm having the same thing? That's a big thing for a quality team. So one of the big things with using partners like Renishaw, EOS, at least at Raytheon, you know, is the feeling that we lack control, that they are developing the parameters, that they are telling us what's good, what's not good, what happens, what doesn't happen, right? And that's even harder for us to kind of accept, especially in the absence of specifications, because the way we do things, right, is a process has already been proven, verified, and there's a specification. And as long as you prove that you follow the specification and you pass the tests that have been defined in the specification, that's how you prove to me that you control your process, right? Well, in the absence of specifications, we find ourselves in the how do I trust that what you're telling me you can repeat it, right? And part of the work we did here was whether we're reusing powder or the powder is actually fresh and brand new. There's a lot of questions as to how often can you reuse and still get the parameters and all of these little teeny tiny things. So what you guys just said were this situation where you were given a set of parameters, right? That's what us as the prime, as the owners of the control, that's what we want to be able to do, because we want to put it in our document. You are going to print this like this with this, right? That's how we control it. And we force the EOS or Renishaw to prove to us that when they set up the machine, they had that, right? And how they controlled it to stay that way throughout the entire print. That's a major factor. And I love the way Kevin phrased it with the idea of saying, looking at it and seeing how good a job these parameters that came in from outside that took us years of understanding this machine and prints and analyzing and testing to come up with a set of parameters that we believe we can print to. And now these other set can print just as good, even improve in some areas, right? And producibility or making it faster, reducing a little bit of the tweaking they would have done because it came out great the first time, you know, just print it and we print it apart. It came out, that is a big effect on the gathering of trust, right? Because I can set the parameters and be confident in them. And then in the reducing risk, cost, schedule, making things faster, printing the first time right, and getting a product out. I imagine for Renishaw and EOS, being able to maybe demonstrate to a customer, right? When they give a quote, I ask you for a print and you tell me it's going to cost you a number that may be low, maybe big, $5,000. I'm sure you put in there a little bit of experimentation, right? Knowing that the first time you print, maybe it doesn't come out 100%. So you may have to do a second print and every company does a little bit of the, how do we do this as a percentage of things like that. Well, being able to reduce that and telling a customer, oh no, we'll run it through our software and we know it's going to come out right the first time. You know, it's this price. Being able to lower the price because you remove that risk, even to companies like EOS and Renishaw, I think it's value added. And then again, go back to us as the owners of that control or wanting that control, being able to set the parameters on the onset and still know that it's going to be a good print. I think it's the biggest seller of this process.
So it seems like, I mean, number one, you're building confidence, and two, it really speaks to the quality of the products that they're making, that you can say, here, do this, and I'm going to get the output that I expect. So sometimes I think we don't give the machine makers enough credit that ultimately what they're making has a lot of dials and a lot of knobs to it, but when you fix them, you can get a prescribed output. I mean, that's ultimately what the primes want.
Well, if I may add, it's also the fact that the parameters are slightly tailored to suit the machine. So take something, for example, as innocuous as spot size. Two machine vendors might have slightly different spot sizes, therefore the energy density at the melt pool is obviously different. It's the fact that the software is taking this into account when it's generating the parameters and still giving you a parameter set that, once completed, should give equivalent results. That, for me, that's the key step, as it's trying to, make force equivalent to the machine.
And to be honest, I'm not trying to make a controversial statement here, but when you look at tier ones, that's their IP, if you put it that way, how they fine tune that. And that's where they charge margins, like depending on, how good one supplier is versus another. So unfortunately, that's not something I think Renishaw or EOS control directly. But I think that's really up to the suppliers and how they want and how much they share. It's really from that standpoint onwards becomes non-standard, if that makes sense.
I would throw in that way back when we were talking to the MDA originally, one of their concerns was the adoptability of AM. That think back in 2016, that how do we get this tool, this new technology, into the hands of more people, and what mechanisms are that? Better machines. Kevin and Kit could talk about that. Things that work to convince the ESIS of the world that, if I'm going to drop 5 million, 10 million, this stuff better work. And so getting tools that made sense, I wouldn't call it the great equalizer, but as Ankit said, that is some company's IP if they know how to make it better. And if you can come along and have software virtual tools that assist that effort, that get you there faster, that's a big important contribution to the industry. And whether it's AlphaStar or some of the many other products that are out there, we're trying to complement what the Ankits and the Kevins are doing so that we can deliver what the ISIS wants.
Yeah, and I keep going back to thinking about what we were doing, what I was doing in 2016, trying to qualify a part for a different customer, and where the maturity of the technology was at that point. I mean, it was easy for me to say to the engineers, like, I don't understand, we're behind schedule. And you could just the look in their eyes of, maybe you should come fight with the machine all day and get it to do what we said. But I think that all the more kudos to you guys for this being done in 2016. We do have a question. Our friend Jim Bednar has posed one, which has gotten quite a lot of votes, and it kind of goes to ESIS. I think so. The process that you use to qualify the parts is it also applicable to safety critical flight components, or will that qualification be different or more stringent?
That's a very interesting question. So at Raytheon, we have developed a set of guidelines of what is required to qualify something based on the criticality of the part. But of course, it's a set of guidelines, and then each program gets to tailor based on the risk that they're willing to assume, the partnerships that they've made to spread the risk or schedule or things like that. So it really, the document's really pretty generic, gives some guidance, but it really is up to the programs. So that actually means that every time we select a part, it needs to be evaluated in terms of criticality and the things that we can and cannot do to verify it. I will tell you that the parameters that we selected, in terms of, because the qualification process, and Rashid, make sure that I'm not misrepresenting things here, right? We were looking at predictability. If I can predict certain parameters and by test proof that the prediction was correct, that means I can trust the rest of the prediction that the print is good and will give me the parameters. And with those, we had porosity, we had, gosh, I'm now in the middle, but there's certain parameters and characteristics that we had our experts take a look at and agree that, if the values of certain things are within certain parameters, then we can trust that the print overall comes out that way. So I think that that portion of it is not necessarily going to change. I think what's going to be a little bit still up in the air, or I shouldn't say it's not going to change. It's usable, and we can improve and grow on it, I should say, rather than it's a throwaway, we will never use it again. But I think where it's going to be different is then how do we test the part? One of the difficulties that we have, or that I have encountered, I'm going to say, and I'll let other people at Raytheon comment if they want to on what they've seen, is you know, we're concentrating on building metal parts, and because we trust our analysis tools, unless it's a really critical part where we've optimized it to the point where you know, our margins are very close, we don't test our metal parts by themselves, right? We test them in systems because we kind of trust the expected performance. So sometimes it is very hard to come up with a set of requirements directly that you can apply to the metal part itself, because now that's the concern, just the metal part itself. We don't not yet trust our tools on that section. So that part of the process is still kind of being defined, which I think is just a matter of, you know, working with our analysts and taking our environments and layering them down all the way to the part. But we haven't, that's not part of a standard process yet in terms of this. So to go back to the question, right, we did work to setting up the parameters for trusting the simulation. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a setup to qualify a part. It was really to qualify the software, and then being able to trust the software that the part printed will give me what I need. But you still have to take the part and go test it in the system in order to consider it qualified within our processes.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting comment that you made in there too, which is like go back to the elegant complexity of these products, and even going to like things that we take for granted in making a part today is that we have an AMS spec for the material and the process and all those things. We're creating those specifications, you know, every week now with the powders and the process and the part for those things.
John,
there's a very yeah, go ahead.
I guess earlier it was discussed that qualification is fungible, and it kind of means different things to different people. And I can talk about for the way AlphaStar looks at internal qualification in regards to our processes that we think can get someone to a point where the OEM's qualification process can kick in to see if we're on the right track. And by that we mean a multi-layered approach to qualification. We would have our first thermal material analysis approach. We're trying to understand the melt pool, the voids, the density, and determining mechanical strength and allowables and temperature-dependent properties. So there you have that first layer. Are you capturing that thermal qualification of the fabrication of the part? And then the next step might be, do you have the internal process qualification? Is there print error management as the build takes place? Are we addressing net shape? Are we addressing roughness? The process concerns. And now we can go to the next level, which would be overall part qualification. And that could be like a fracture control plan, and that could be another level. So if we can solve, if AlphaStar and AlphaStar's tools can solve those internal problems, we're confident that we're on the right track to delivering a result that the OEM will be able to meet their challenges that they want to see in parts. It's that, again, that multi-level, multi-scale, undertaken both through fabrication and validation testing at every level to know what's going on as you move forward and have confidence in the process. And in our overall process, this big 5-year effort, once we thought we had established a process and produced results, say with UDRI, we were then able to take it to commercial platforms where our friends such as Kevin and Ankit came on board and explored it on their first commercial platform, and then say in the case of Renishaw, 2 variations of their own commercial platform, and then with EOS, can we duplicate that with a 3rd commercial platform? It's that idea of constantly challenging the process so that internal qualification is satisfied to address the OEM's qualifications.
Before I go to the next question, Anchor or Kevin, do you have any, I want to give you an opportunity to jump in if you have. Otherwise, I think maybe you'll have an input on this next question. So the next question is a good one. I wish it's anonymous, but I think this is intriguing. Do you find that the technical barriers to qualification are for the most part solved, and that the customer hesitancy is more psychological than technical? So Anka and Kevin, I'm going to begin, and Isis, I'm going to keep you towards the end. I think.
Sure. No, I'll take a first stab at it. I think it's both. I don't think it can be one or the other. I think it's part of both. On the technical side, definitely there is some hesitancy because, this technology introduction hasn't been here for, 5 decades. We don't have 6 decades worth of data there. So there's obviously a technical hesitancy there. There are ways to address that. One of the ways that we're kind of highlighting here on the panel from AlphaStar. So that's one way. The psychological one for me is more on the education part, trying to educate people on additive, which I personally feel right now is qualification is not the biggest barrier. It's the education is the biggest barrier in adoption for additive in general. So I think if we can resolve that, working and trying to get as many people exposed to this technology, trying to get into colleges and universities, trying to get additive into curricula for next generation engineers who are going to be the next program managers, who are going to be making decisions. So, they would be able to make a better informed decision than program managers today. So I think it's that part of the puzzle that we have to collectively solve. I think it's not a silver bullet to both of overnight resolve everything, in my opinion.
And I think I'd pick up the end of that statement by saying it's time. As Ankit just said, it's going to take these students making their way through, but it's not just graduate engineering students making their way through. It's also students coming from perhaps more design background, product design background, but also not even necessarily just degree students, it's technical students coming through as well. So, apprenticeship students going out and practically getting into the machines and working with them. And indeed, you look further out, it's guys and ladies currently working in the industries using additive and leaving that and making their way into the education space. That's real long term, but that's, I remember when I was at college, the instructors you really listened closely to were the ones that had been doing it for 30 years and knew their stuff. So anything we can use as an industry to try and shorten body of knowledge agglomeration is critical. So any tool that can try and streamline somewhat the process development and locking down workflow is massive. It's massively important.
Yeah, and just very, very briefly, John.
I'm smiling as they're talking because I agree with Ankit in that there's a combination of factors, and it's not just even technical versus psychological. There's a few other things, and I think about some of the benefits that were emphasized when additive manufacturing, was gaining strength. You can print anything. There's no penalty for complexity. You can tailor this to get whatever result you want. All those great things that we were putting out there are exactly the same things that are holding us back, right? The fact that you can tailor the parameters so much, then people fear that how do you control it? How do you know that you have the most optimized ones unless you try them all, right? So this great benefit is one of the holdbacks. You can print anything. Complexity is free. Well, the more complex you're printing, the less ways we have to verify that what we wanted to print is actually what was printed. So now we're stepping back, right? So there's a combination of factors. I do agree like I said, that the software does get us started, right? Does get us the gaining of the trust and gaining confidence and experience, and combination of what Kevin and Anki were saying with education. It is very hard for a chief engineer or a quality manager, like I said, and these are the to make decisions, to be able to say, yes, this is not going to work. We ask them, hey, what do you need to feel comfortable? They can't even come up with an answer because they know that there's a lot of things out there that they need to consider, but they don't know them, right? They would have to go study them. They would have to get more understanding. And it's hard to go out there and learn all these things after you have years of experience. So the new generation, right, is coming up learning these things, keeping that within the experience that they're gathering with all the other factors. So I agree that it'll start getting easier for people to be able to assess risk and trust their assessments. But in the meantime, we need disruptors, right? We need people that are risk takers and are able to properly evaluate it or properly document it, I should say, because the big thing is we take risks all the time. The important thing is that it's documented and that we all know that that is a risk and we are all in agreement to move forward. And having the backing of the rest of the team and your company to say, hey, if the risk is realized, because that's the big thing, you're not going to be penalized because you took it, right? We all knew that there was a chance. It's like playing in the casino. We all knew we could lose the money, but we're going to try and minimize the risk and take our chances. So that's how we've been making the little steps that we go, right? Finding the right person with the right personality and just enough knowledge to want to try it, to want to risk it, and to be able to express it at the next level. And as I was saying earlier with a defense company, I think the commercial world may have a little bit of an advantage, although I don't know, because maybe the boards of directors or the stockholders are worse than the U.S. government. I don't know. But for us is that we have to find the people inside of the company to do this, to take the risk, to take the time to learn, to be able to assess the risk. And then we got to find equivalent people at the customer side, right? Because the people that are helping develop these technologies, the people that are in the government that are putting up the money to do these projects, they're actually not the same ones that are buying our products. So there's got to be a communication in there too of, hey, yeah, we have developed, we put the money in, we've seen the results, but the customer that's actually saying, approving our steps may not know any of this, right? May not even trust it. I don't trust a person I don't work with or things like that. So it's massive. It's going to take time. It's not going to be, in a little bit, but definitely we've made gigantic strides in the last 5 years, and software like this and partnering with printers, service providers to continue getting the data out there and continue the education. That's another aspect that we're concentrating a lot at Raytheon, is in providing the training to allow more people to get this knowledge, right? Open it up and bring it up and push it. We will make strides. It's going to take a little bit of time. The answer is not there yet, I don't think.
Ankit, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just trying to say, from a machining home side, we don't help.
I think Ankit froze.
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So from a machining home side, I was just trying to add a very small comment. We don't help the situation. The technology is just changing too fast for qualification to be standardized. Like right now, I think standardization and regulatory agencies are starting to deal with multi-laser systems. God knows what's going to happen when we start eliminating standards and go to multi-mode lasers themselves. So the future holds pretty good for the technology, but I sometimes do kind of, understand that from the industry side, we need to really pick up adoption because it is going to go through a very radical change in the next few years.
I was somehow, really imagining a new line of business that I could open up, to maybe have a virtual couch, to bring stress engineers in, and we could, talk about how do you feel about additive manufacturing? How do you feel about the qualification process? I think that also reminded me, Isis, your gambling comment. I remember when we were trying to implement friction stir welding, and one of my colleagues was making a pitch to management. And he's like, it's just like craps. If you don't put your money on the table, you're never going to understand it. And I was like, that's a perfect analogy, and never use it again.
That is true. That is, unfortunately, it is absolutely true. Somebody has to stick their neck out and put it all on the table. And if you see the success stories, right? There's probably tons out there, and I'm probably, but the way GE, just took over, bought the machine, dedicated, spent until they got it, until it came. That is, in my mind, one way of ensuring that you get there and that you have all the control, right? That you have all the knowledge, you don't have to share it or trust anybody else with it. I don't think that's going to work for everything, but it was one way where it was successful to do it. I'm sure there's middle ground somewhere, not going all the way like they did, but somewhere in the middle. And software like AlphaStar is doing, hopefully will help us get to that point. But yeah, it's a gamble at this point. It's a gamble.
I would throw in there that to complement what Ankit said and Kevin said, that the platform makers and manufacturers, their technology is just exploding, whether it's multi lasers or every other thing that's coming into play. What would make an ICME tool valid or worthwhile in that discussion is always maintaining the deep physics, always committing themselves to the deep science, trying to understand that fundamental behavior and bringing that to the customer. I think that's what we try to do, and I think that's what of our competitors always try to do, but that's the essence. The deep science, the deep physics, capture that multi-level, multi-scale technology, and then bring it forward and hopefully validate it at every level so customers can have confidence in what you're doing.
We've got about 10 minutes left before we move, and there's a lot of good questions. I think some of them are pretty tactical, so I might just suggest, maybe those are great questions to ask, more on the one-on-one piece. I was wondering if you're all okay with it, if we look at kind of going forward, what we see happening, so maybe Isis, I'll start with you, now that you've kind of got this confidence with this project, where are you headed to next?
Yeah, so I think, like I said earlier, what I keep trying to do it is educate as much people as I can, right? Try to open up my network and bring the results in and introduce them to as many people as we can until I find that I call it the aligning of the stars, right? Where you get the right technical person and the right programmatic person and the right program and the right customer that are all aligned and have the same knowledge and agree to this particular risk. And in the meantime, supporting as much as we can every facet of this technology to increase knowledge and increase confidence in it. But at this point, that's all I see myself as being able to do. As I grow myself inside the company and my scope of influence grows, hopefully things will also move forward. But at this point, that's my path.
Perfect. So you summoned a memory that I had with Ralph Resnick when he was with America Makes, that we said additive needs to learn a lot about manufacturing, and manufacturing needs to learn a lot about additive. So somehow those two populations have to merge. And I think, Ankit, that was both you and Kevin kind of expressed this thing. And as a provider of training ourselves, I mean, this isn't a competition between any one group, because not enough people are accessing the training. The training is there, but just not nearly enough people are availing themselves of it. It seems like we're still arguing that you need to take the training, and it's like, man, that is water is good. You need water every day. We're beyond that.
Is something, John, we always tell people that you can never have enough of. Post-COVID world, everyone's on million Zoom calls, and I know there's Zoom fatigue or web fatigue, whatever people want to call it. The one thing what we get from customers is we want to please, we can go back to that when take a training. I know you guys offer training, we offer training, Rent offer training. There are plenty and millions of resources that people do, but like I said, there's just not enough people.
Where do you reflections on that, or where are we headed?
Such a good question, because there's so many avenues you can potentially go down, isn't there? I think in situ monitoring of process and combining that with feed-forward simulation to try and identify is going to be very important. I'm hesitant to talk about the notion of closed-loop processing, particularly in aerospace. I was having a conversation in the networking earlier. The conversation turned to closed-loop processing, and a group from working in aerospace pointed out that the notion of 3D printers adjusting their own parameters is actually even more scary than what we're talking about already. But certainly being able to spot divergence as it happens would be a big win. And so I see associated technologies like machine learning, artificial intelligence becoming increasingly important. The thing with our process is that it's inherently digital, it's inherently data founded. So the solutions are going to be largely digital, those that are over and above time, which we already talked about.
Perfect. Rashid, I'm going to give you the last word. You're the linchpin.
I see basically 3 avenues that we kind of touched on. I understand Kevin's hesitation, but I see the direction would be more automation. I mean, if we can trust an airplane to fly, we can trust a car to go across the Golden Gate Bridge, and we should have confidence that at some point in time, with the proper technology and the proper oversight, we would have these systems where they are having full feed forward control, they are having full feedback control, and they are correcting, hopefully not making the mistakes, but then catching them and identifying them. Parallel to that, areas that we're exploring, particularly in the grain boundary engineering, is making the additive platform an active tool to actually design alloys, to bring it on board and have it drive the final direction of the material system and the part. We've been exploring technologies, what we call intrinsic heat treatments. So instead of a post-heat treatment, you're playing with the parameters to affect the final grain boundary outcomes, because you're changing how either the material is being laid down or how it's being cooled or what's taking place internally. So it becomes an active component in the design process of the material. And then in the case of the legacy parts and the supply chain, that's where the machine agnosticism really can take place, where you're going to have surges or need for mass productions of parts, which normally are not that critical, but all of a sudden certain circumstances arise, whether it's such as our COVID experience or anything that might happen in other avenues, other areas. The ability to move from platform to platform and still have confidence that you're getting the part the way you want it to be is a trend that has to go forward. Hopefully we'll get there, but it's a critical vision of the future.
Well, great. Thank you all for, I think this was a pretty fantastic session. We didn't get through but half of the questions that we originally envisioned, but that's okay. That's usually a sign of success. If you'll stick around for the discussion afterwards, I think that'll afford more one-on-one type discussions. Certainly from TBGA perspective, we love the training discussion. we would love for you to consider some training. We are actively working with at least one of you on the panel today, and I think in general, just our usual advice to the industry, if we can assist with future panels and getting some gender diversity across these type sessions, we're happy to nominate great speakers and things like that. So from a TBJ perspective, really appreciate America Makes inviting me to moderate the session, and I hope to meet some of you in person someday, and in other cases to re-meet you in person someday. So with that, Tara, I think I might turn it back over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. You guys were all awesome. It was such a great conversation, and thank you all for joining this panel and sharing the projects too. Huge thanks to AlphaStar for pulling this together to share this information. Ankit, Isis, Kevin, really appreciate everything, and John, thank you again for that. And I'll just kind of touch on to what John said. I hope you all can stay for the networking where you can maybe have some more one-on-one conversations with these fantastic panelists. So we'll go back into that. We'll close out at 2:30, so we hope we can at least stay for a drink and a snack with everyone. Thank you all again. Hope to see you guys soon. Hope to see you guys all in person, like John said. Yeah, hope you have a great rest of your day. And oh, real quick, just forgot, we are recording this session, so we will have this uploaded on the American Makes YouTube channel within about 48 hours or so. And everyone will be sent a link to that have registered for the event. So if you miss some tidbits or want to go back to it, you'll be able to see this great conversation again. So with that said, thank you all again, and see you at networking.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.